Why do you think Sri Lanka has not enacted legislations regarding the LGBTQ plus community?
As it stands, the Sri Lankan constitution guarantees the right to equality before the law and equal protection of the law of all persons by Article 12. It also prohibits discrimination on the grounds of race, religion, language, caste, sex, political opinion, and place of birth. Notably, therefore, the Constitution does not prohibit discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. Sri Lanka has not enacted legislations regarding LGBTQ community. For that, the closest reasons are cultural factors and being Asian country. LGBT people from several different parts of Sri Lanka reported abuse by police, with some reporting violence and sexual abuse. Transgender women reported the majority of abuses. Other LGBT people said that they were subjected to extortion, bribery to avoid torture, and criminal records. Victims of abuse had little or no access to medical care or legal aid. Many were unaware of the few institutions that do provide sanctuary to the LGBTQ community, most of which are based largely in urban centers. Sri Lanka should follow the example set by Nepal and India. Sri Lankan Parliament should demonstrate broad national support for the rights of all Sri Lankans and promptly repeal the law.
So currently in Sri Lanka, there are no express legislations that deal with the rights of the LGBTQ community. And one of the main reasons for this could be that through the majoritarian electorate, the opinion of the majority is reflected through the legislations as well. And in the current society of Sri Lanka, there is a lot of social stigma, internalized homophobia, and cultural barriers which prevent us from having meaningful discussions about these topics as well. And even more, there are implicit legislations such as the Article 12 of the Constitution of Sri Lanka, which prevents discrimination of all kind. I believe that this is not progressive enough for Sri Lanka as a country when upholding the rights of the LGBT community as a whole.
According to human rights lawyers, currently Sri Lanka has no laws regarding the LGBTQ community. The administrative system within the country, the understanding amongst the public service providers, and the lack of public awareness makes it a challenge to implement laws supporting the LGBTQ community. However, since 2017, Sri Lanka has introduced anti-discriminatory laws for the LGBTQ community relating to employment, obtaining of goods and services, and rights to changing one's gender legally. In January 2022, the government had proposed anti-discriminatory laws for the LGBTQ community, decriminalizing same-sex sexual activities from the Human Rights Action Plan. In November, Sri Lanka's Deputy Solicitor General had pledged to change the penal code and affirmed that the Sri Lankan government is committed to ensuring that no provisions in law would apply to persons of LGBTQ community in a discriminatory manner. The appeal brought by Rosana Caldera, the Executive Director of Equal Grounds, before the UN Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women on the 23rd of March 2022 is also significant as it rules that criminalization of same-sex sexual conduct is a violation of human rights. This ruling, along with the increasing understanding amongst the emerging generations on the LGBTQ rights, is promising to quicken the legislative process within Sri Lanka as well.
What legislative actions could Sri Lanka adopt in its current state to provide more representation or rights to the LGBTQ plus community?
Under current situation of Sri Lanka, the Penal Code, which is a product of colonial era law and which is based on India's iteration, criminalizes same-sex relation through Section 365 and 365A, which criminalize carnal intercourse against the order of nature and acts of gross indecency, respectively. Also, Section 399 of the Penal Code criminalizes cheating by impersonation and has often been used against transgender persons, with cases being filed against them for misleading the public. Because of this criminalization, it has been reported that LGBTQ plus people in Sri Lanka face abuse by police, violence and sexual abuse. Some have been subjected to extortion and bribery to avoid torture and criminal records. Therefore, the Parliament should, through legislative measures, change, repeal these legislative provisions decriminalizing matters regarding LGBTQ plus community. However, if the only resolution is through the courts, then the victim and witness protection laws in Sri Lanka should be strengthened to enable petitioners who are willing to challenge the law to confidently come forward and do it safely. Further, Article 12 of the Constitution of Sri Lanka prohibits discrimination on the grounds of race, religion, language, caste, sex, political opinion, place of birth, or any one of such grounds. Although any one of such grounds could be interpreted in a way that includes grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity or expression, an explicit prohibition regarding those grounds cannot be found. Therefore, constitutional reforms should be brought forward to explicitly prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression.
Homosexuality is a criminal offence in Sri Lanka, and sections 365 and 365A of the Penal Code criminalise consensual sex between two people of the same sex. Precisely, Section 365 criminalises carnal intercourse against the order of the nature, whereas Section 365A criminalises gross indecency between male persons. Those who are convicted of these offences may face up to 10 years of imprisonment. So I think that it is high time that we decriminalise these said offences and provide the LGBTQ community in Sri Lanka with more rights and representation.
How would you personally respond to one of your friends if they come out as a member of the LGBTQ plus community?
If one of my friends comes out as a member of the LGBTQ community, I'll definitely respect her decision and encourage her not to be afraid to embrace the fact that she is different from the majority. I would motivate her not to feel awkward or bad about it, because sexual orientation and gender identity are integral aspects of ourselves and they should never lead to discrimination or abuse. And after all, everyone's sexual orientation is a personal preference and it's up to the individual to decide how they want to define themselves. I also believe that gender identity is more of how someone feels inside, so the LGBTQ community needs to be accepted for who they are and not what people want them to be. In fact, they deserve the right to be who they are, just the same as any other human being. Honestly, I think we all need to have a genuine, strong concern for the well-being of the LGBTQ people, especially at a time when the importance of the protection and equality of the LGBTQ community has come to the forefront. So we need to be able to support the ones who start feeling they are part of the LGBTQ community. Therefore, if one of my friends comes out as a member of the LGBTQ community, I would definitely stand by my friend, make her feel comfortable, accepted, supported, and most importantly, let her be who she really is.
Coming out as a part of the LGBTQ plus community can be a little terrifying. The uncertainty of figuring out whether someone is safe to come out can fill them with a lot of distress and anxiety. So you have to remember, if a friend or a loved one chooses to come out to you, it means that they have trusted you to show this very important part of themselves. While it might come as a surprise first, understand that their sexuality makes them no less of the person that you once loved and appreciated. Because their identity is something much more than their sexuality. At the same time, I believe it is something very much worth celebrating. Your friend has just come out as minority that some people may not support. So, first rule, just be kind. Show that you don't fall under the disapproving crowd by affirming that you are still their friend no matter what. These words of affirmation will provide them with a sense of relief. Just stay away from the jokes that may be deemed harmful and inappropriate. Do not act completely different and uptight either. So your friend would just want to act the same way that you have always done. If their signals are unclear, just ask them how you should support them as a friend. Give them a chance to express their desires by opening a clear and open means of communication. Finally, remember that everyone has their own opinions on what they support or not. But most importantly, it is essential to keep that in your heart that we all are human.
What do you believe are some of the world's progressive moves that Sri Lanka may learn from regarding the LGBTQ+ community?
The right to equality guaranteed by the Sri Lankan Constitution. But the real question is whether we truly enjoy that right with regards to the LGBTQ society and whether they are treated and acknowledged as normal citizens. Unfortunately, they do not enjoy the same rights as other citizens in Sri Lanka. So, as a country, we must introduce new policies that grant the LGBTQ community equal rights as stated in the Constitution and recognize them as normal citizens regardless of their sexual needs. Therefore, we may enhance and implement new laws and legislative measures that recognize and legitimize the LGBTQ society in Sri Lanka. The other concern is whether merely enacting legislations would affect how others see and treat them. To do so, we must provide sexual education to the students and make them understand this is a regular scenario in every country. Thus, it is normal and that they should not be looked down upon by others.
In the past decade, different countries around the world have made significant progress in ensuring the rights of the LGBTQ+ community. It is time Sri Lanka too followed suit. A good place to begin with, I believe, is by first decriminalizing homosexuality within Sri Lanka. If you are to look for inspiration from different countries around the world, I believe we don't have to look too far because there's India. In the year 2018, the Indian Supreme Court held the Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code to be unconstitutional and thereby effectively decriminalizing homosexuality within India. And I believe that it is time Sri Lanka too followed this progressive move and decriminalized homosexuality within our own country. Apart from this, if we look at Taiwan, in the year 2019, Taiwan became the first Asian country to legalize marriage equality. Marriage equality is an important topic of discussion when we discuss about the rights of the LGBTQ+ community. And it is time that Sri Lanka too ensured marriage equality to ensure that the rights of the LGBTQ+ community is protected within our country. Apart from this, Nepal too became the first country in the world by including the third gender category in their federal consensus. This is quite a progressive move as well as a significant one at that, considering the fact that the non-binary people often get overlooked even within discussions regarding the LGBTQ+ community. And this is perhaps another significant move that Sri Lanka too can adopt into our legal framework. Apart from this, yet another progressive move that I believe Sri Lanka perhaps should follow is incorporating sex education inclusive of the information regarding LGBTQ+ community into our school curriculum. In the United States of America, states such as Colorado, California, and New Jersey have effectively followed this method, and they have effectively made it mandatory to include information about the LGBTQ+ community within their school curriculum. And I believe that this is quite a progressive move, considering that teaching our children at a young age about gender, sexual orientation, and identity would result in a citizenry who is more prone to accepting and respecting our differences.